Well, good morning. I'm very concerned about the challenges we face as a country. I think there's at least three very significant challenges. I think I'm uniquely placed to deal with them. We need to deliver Brexit, we need to unify our country, and we need to keep Jeremy Corbyn out of Downing Street. And in doing that, I think I've got a credible and honest plan that will deliver Brexit. I think because of my own background, my experience, and my vision for the future, I think we can bring the country together.
Right, just to explain to us in absolutely crystal clear terms what your Brexit proposal is.
Well, my plan is, first of all, is to recognise that we're not going to have another general election before Brexit is delivered. I don't think that would be right in any way whatsoever. So we have
You
to
may
deal.
not be able to stop it as Tory.
I may not be able to stop it.
House of Commons, it happens.
I may not be able to stop it. We're in a parliamentary democracy, but I want to recognise that the next leader, the next prime minister, will be dealing with this parliament and this speaker, and we have to recognise the division and the challenges that exist in that parliament. So what I will do is focus on the one Brexit deal that has already got through Parliament, and that was the withdrawal agreement with a change to the backstop. It's the only thing that's got through Parliament at the moment.
So you would renegotiate the backstop?
I would try to renegotiate the backstop. And what I would do in doing that is that I would focus on Ireland. I think Ireland is the absolute key to this. It is, you could sort of say, it's the tail that wags the dog on this. And we need to make sure that we can do more to build that goodwill with Ireland, to give them more confidence. I've thought long and hard about this. In my department at the moment, I've got border force. We've done work for months on what alternative arrangements that border could look like. And if I may, and what's missing is that goodwill. And what I would do is I would make a grand gesture, a grand offer to Ireland that we would cover all their costs, the upfront costs, the running costs of a new digitised border. I think it can be done in a couple of years, but we would cover their costs.
I do want to come on to that in a minute. But before we do, let's talk about the first part of the plan, which is to renegotiate the withdrawal agreement backstop. Let me read you what the Luxembourg Prime Minister said about that this week. I'm going to read you slowly because it's important. No, he said. Renegotiate? No. No, 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 no. No renegotiation? No. That's 10 no's so far. We had the negotiation, we finished the negotiation, and that is more or less exactly what many of the other leaders say as well, including Mark Rutte, who's a friend of Britain, including the Taoiseach in Ireland, including Michel Barnier, and many more. You will not get that renegotiation.
Well, I understand that, and I understand where the Europeans are coming from, but what I also understand is that they too want to see a orderly Brexit for us. They want to see a deal with the UK, but I'll tell you what.
How many more times does he have to say no before you can hear him?
Your own reporter from Europe, Cathy Adler, she reported, I think, just last week that she's detecting amongst European leaders a bit of regret, thinking that perhaps they pushed Theresa May too hard. She's detecting a change in mood. Now, this is your own reporter saying this.
I'm just reading out loud what they have been saying in public. All the way through, we're told they didn't really mean it, they don't really mean this, they'll break apart, they won't stick together, and we've been wrong about this. We may still be wrong about this. They may very well be unprepared to renegotiate in a serious way. Let me, however, come on to your Irish border proposals. Now, you say that the border force thinks that this can be done. Have you spoken to anyone in the border force you can quote? Can you give us any detail? Can you explain to us why they think this can be done?
I've commissioned work from Border Force. Remember, Border Force, they do just that. They run borders. We advise other countries around the world. They're very good at it. And
will you publish it?
If I'm allowed to publish it, I will. If I'm Prime Minister, I will publish a lot more because I want to see more transparency in this debate. But what I am sure of is that a modern digitised border, which is a completely open border with no infrastructure on the border, because I believe passionately in that, is necessary for our union and to protect our union, that I think it is right that we make a gesture to Ireland to do something differently. And also, if I may say, I think it is right that we pay for it because it's economically, I think it makes sense because it will unlock a Brexit deal. And morally, I think it's right because we're committed to peace on the island of Ireland.
Lots of people would like it to happen for very good reasons. Most people say it's not ready yet, and it may become available one day, but we're a long way away. Simon Coveney, the Tánaiste, the Deputy Prime Minister in Ireland, says, this is like saying to Ireland, we are going to replace the backstop with an aspirational hope and a commitment that somehow we will solve this, but we don't know how. Is that reasonable? Your agreement is an agreement to have an agreement, but you don't know what it's actually going to be.
Well, I don't think it's just an aspirational hope, because as I've said, I've done work on this. Border Force has done work on this. you can have a digitized border that is very different to the backstop. It can be done. It can be done in 2 years. And you know what Border Force says? They say the main thing that's missing is goodwill on both sides, that ability to want to cooperate and want to get this done. So something needs to break that deadlock, and I've got a plan for that.
What I'm pointing out to you is that the Irish government says it's unworkable. Let me come on to the centrepiece of your strategy, however, because I thought there's one slightly strange thing in the way that you laid it out in the newspapers beforehand. You said, first of all, that you're going to prepare and plan for no deal. And you've accepted that the talks might not happen, so we might end up with no deal at the end of October. But you've also said, and let me read it back, that it's simply not credible to promise you can deliver no deal if Parliament is set against it, as Parliament is. Anyone who promised this would risk drawing us into a pre-Brexit general election this year, driving us into a pre-Brexit general election this year. A disaster, you say, first and foremost for our country and public trust in democracy, but also for our party. So it sounds to me like you're saying, elect me and my plan B is disaster.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I mean, you've read it out perfectly correctly, and let me explain. No responsible leader of this country cannot prepare for no deal. You have to prepare for no deal. I'm not saying I'm going to prepare for no deal because that's my plan, that's what I want to deliver. I'm clear, I want a deal. I passionately want a deal. But it is only responsible to prepare for the possible outcome of a no deal. I mean, at a minimum, for example, France has already said, it said a while back, there's been reports that they may not even agree to an extension. A future extension would require all countries to agree. Now, I don't want to see an extension. I want to see us leave on October the 31st. But there is a real possibility that a no deal could happen, and it's absolutely responsible to prepare for that. And also, what I want is to make sure we use the time we've got to prepare even more.
You've raised yourself the question of an extension. Can I ask you directly, are there any circumstances in which Sajid Javid, as Prime Minister, would ask for an extension beyond the end of October?
I would not want an extension.
No,
I would not.
Is one thing. Are there any circumstances in which you might ask for it?
Look, I'm clear that my plan would be to leave on October the 31st. I want to leave with a deal. But if I have to choose between no deal and no Brexit, I would pick no deal. But what I want and what I will absolutely focus on is leaving with a deal.
Okay, I'm listening very, very carefully to your words. You're an experienced politician. I ask you again, are there any circumstances in which you would leave, you would extend beyond the end of October?
I cannot envisage circumstance where I would want to have an extension. Or what I would.
Lots of
no, but let me.
words.
You quoted from my article.
Yeah.
And let me just pick, because at the end of that same article, I think you're referring to, what I've said is the obvious, that we are a parliamentary democracy. We are not selecting at this point. We're not selecting a dictator for this country. We're selecting a prime minister who will run a minority party in a minority government. And what that means is that we are subject to Parliament, the sovereignty of Parliament. So what I cannot predict, and what no one can predict, is what Parliament may itself do. And now it's got this power to have its own sort of initiated legislation. I can't predict that.
But in our parliamentary system, the Prime Minister does have one absolute, clear, extraordinary power in this process, which is only the Prime Minister can go to Brussels and say, please, can we have an extension? Which is why it's so important to ask people like you whether you would ask for that under any circumstances. It's not what Parliament does, it's what the Prime Minister does.
Well, that's not something I would do.
But
it's not something I would do. But let me just say again, we're a parliamentary democracy. What we've seen in the last few months is Parliament has taken on some extraordinary powers to initiate its own legislation.
So if Parliament asked for it, you could
have, if it's statute, if it's the law, I would not break the law if I was Prime Minister. Of course I would observe the law. This is about leading a parliamentary democracy. And remember, the whole point of Brexit is also to honour that referendum, which is also about democracy, as is our Parliament and its sovereignty.
You are Home Secretary. Can you promise us now that if we leave without a deal, Britain will be as safe afterwards as we are now?
What I can promise is that we will continue to be one of the safest countries in the world. What I will not...
That's not a yes.
We will continue to be a very, very safe country. That said, I've always recognised the value of European contribution when it comes to security.
So the answer is a bit that we less share. Safe. Less safe.
I would like us to have that cooperation, but let me tell you, we talked about planning for no deal. Again, I don't want no deal, but we need to plan. What I've already done as Home Secretary, and lots of people said this won't be possible, is I've tried to work on bilateral no-deal security agreements with our European partners. And just a couple of weeks ago, I announced that I've reached such an agreement with Germany, one of our biggest security partners, who have said publicly, if there is a no deal, they will enter into a no deal security arrangement with us. So there's a lot we can do to still protect our security cooperation, even in a no deal situation.